Welcome to our monthly broadcast, Global E-Commerce Unlocked. Today we'll be discussing 4 things that you can do to improve your margins. Yes, there's so many other things that you can do, but I want to focus on these 4 things for this session, and then we can obviously look into other ones in the upcoming broadcasts. The first thing you can do is review your FBA spend. Did you know that there's an FBA rate card? What does this actually mean? So on the rate card, you can actually see how much you're going to be spending on FBA fulfillment fees. And this depends on the country and the amount that you're storing. But to put into perspective, let's use a client, Jacob, as an example. So imagine if Jacob wants to fulfill his inventory from France, move obviously to the FBA in France, and store locally. What does this actually mean? Jacob would have to invest into getting a VAT number. Obviously, this comes with a cost. He would then have to add the VAT compliance onto his existing contract with Avast. So again, this adds another fee. But as soon as Jacob sells 240 units a year, this is only 20 a month, he's already saving costs in fulfillment. And let's look at the table. For example, if he then sold 500 instead of just 240, he's cutting costs even more. So by storing locally, he's already made a profit, even though he obviously had that initial investment cost. What you could also do is look at new markets, not just the new products. As we all know, looking for new products is time costly and expensive. You have to look at product development, the manufacturer, look at the packaging for that specific product. Whereas if you have a product that's already doing well in one market, why not expand this product that is actually working well, you've invested in it, and expand it into another market? Yes, this does come with investment, so you will have to localize and you'll have to look at regulations in that country, but it's just one thing, rather than having to do a new product and then invest it into a new market. The European opportunity is huge. Yes, there's loads of countries within Europe, but as soon as you've expanded, you can then tap into all of these markets. As you can see, it now composes of $828 billion that you could be expanding your products into. So it's not just about expanding into a country, it's also looking to see what marketplaces are available in those countries. A lot of local buyers would rather buy from their local marketplace rather than places such as Amazon. So do have a look. In Germany, for example, Zalando does really well, or you also have Bol.com or Otto Group or Allegro, all based in Europe. So once you've expanded into that country, like Jacob did with his FBA fees, Jacob could not only sell on Amazon in France because he has his VAT number, he could also expand into Cdiscount. And he's already now selling in 2 marketplaces using 1 VAT number. Here are some of the stats that these marketplaces are generating in these countries. We mentioned Cdiscount in France. It actually accounts for 11 million visits per month. You also have Belgium and Netherlands, where Bol is very popular. Or, of course, AliExpress, which is known worldwide, especially in the European Union. So you might be thinking, how do I expand? We've narrowed it down to 8 steps. Of course, some people are going to take longer to go from step to step, or you might even be in a position that you can skip some steps. But if we go through the 8 steps, the first thing that you need to do is your market research. As we were mentioning, there's product compliance that you need to take into consideration, labeling, so make sure you know what the requirements are for that country. Then you might ask yourself, do I need to set up a new company? Or should I use the one that I have existing? Most of the time, the existing one is enough, but we can discuss different options. Then you need to know your finances. Do I have the capital to expand into these countries? As we mentioned, there's an investment to do with VAT. You need to get your VAT numbers. But let's just do a finance check and make sure that you have enough capital to cover all your costs. Next is your Forex account. As we all know, there's different currencies in the different markets, so you want to make sure you're getting your best conversion rate. Step 5 would be compliant with all the rules. Every country has different local rules that you need to adhere to. With things evolving more and more and EPR coming into place in more countries, make sure that you speak to an advisor so they can guarantee that you have everything in place for that specific country. Then we discussed about where would you store your goods. We discussed about the FBA rate card, but you also have 3PLs and different options that you can choose from. Make sure that you're using the most cost-effective for you and the right thing for you at that time. You can then expand into other ones, but potentially pick one to initially start with. Then you need to localize your listings. We want to make sure that your keywords are adaptable for that country, and then immediately when the buyer is looking for the products, they're finding your products. So make sure that you're using keywords and local words so that the buyers are looking for your product. And then of course, think global. Yes, we've touched up on the EU, but there's Australia, UAE, KSA, USA. There's so many markets out there to expand your product into. Also make sure that you're reclaiming incorrectly charged VAT. We see this all the time. We've got some example cases coming up, but just so that you're aware, make sure that you're being correctly charged by Amazon invoices. So many Amazon sellers are now struggling because either their address is wrong or they didn't add the VAT number on the invoices, and we want to make sure that you're only being charged for the VAT that you should be charged for, or if you have been charged for additional VAT, that we claim this back for you. This is one case study to give it a bit of perspective. So this is in relation to the correct address. So make sure that the Amazon invoice that is being issued out to you has your correct address. You might have given them your address, but make sure that this is visible on the invoice. Otherwise, the VAT charge could be incorrect. And this is another example in relation to the VAT number. Yes, you could have the right address on it, but then if you don't have the VAT number correctly added onto the Amazon invoice, again, you could be being charged VAT that you shouldn't be charged for. Or if you put it on now, we could reclaim the VAT for you and make sure that you're not being charged for something that you shouldn't. On the topic of VAT, we just want to make sure that you know exactly what triggers a VAT registration requirement. It's not in all cases that you need to have a VAT number. You need to make sure that you have it in the countries that you're storing your inventory in. Yes, it still applies for FBA and 3PLs, although you're obviously storing in someone else's warehouse. These are your products, so you need to have the VAT number in that specific country. Under the Pan EU program that everyone knows about under Amazon, before you used to have to store in 7 countries no matter what. Now you have 6 countries and you can choose where you store and therefore where you have the VAT number. This obviously gives everyone a lot more flexibility. Because of the market research that you've done, you can decide which countries is best suited for your products and you don't have to do all 7 like before. And obviously failing to register for VAT can result in penalties, so that's what we're here for. If this is the case, we can obviously look into it and assist you. And finally, the 4th step that we would suggest looking into is utilizing government programs. For example, the famous PVA that everyone is talking about. PVA actually stands for Postponed VAT Accounting, and it's eligible in France and in the UK. Essentially what it means is that you don't have to pay for VAT at the point of entry. This gets deferred and you just do your VAT filings. So it's a great way of initiating and expanding into those markets that maybe you were a bit hesitant to do at the beginning. If we remove this import VAT, then it's much easier to expand. All you need to do is ensure that you've got a CDS account that we can do for you and then import into these countries. The difference between PVA and the traditional way of accounting for import VAT is that import VAT traditionally, or still existing in some countries, is that you have to pay for the import VAT when you import the products. This is paid for at the customs border. And then we as your tax agent or whoever you have dealing with your tax would reclaim this back for you. Depending on the country, this takes a variety of time. So for example, in Germany, it can take 3 months approximately. In Spain, it can take a bit longer. So you do have the options of postponed VAT accounting, where, as in the instance of France and the UK, you just don't pay for the import VAT, and then you can import into the product, store your product, and sell it, obviously using your VAT number, but it means that you have that additional cash flow to invest in other places. A lot of people do ask us, how do I apply for PVA in France? It's actually automatic. So anyone that's importing into France will have the PVA eligibility, and all they need to have is have a French VAT number and an EORI number in the EU to be able to import. And once you import into France, PVA will be applied and you won't have to pay for import VAT. We're hoping these 4 tips help you cut your margins and expand your business even further. We'll be doing more of these tips in the upcoming broadcasts, but up next, my colleague Piero will be joining me and we'll be discussing a few of the news topics that are currently in the e-commerce world and just explaining a bit more of what they mean.
Hello everyone, and thank you for coming back for the e-commerce news segment. Now Tyler, there's a new rule coming out from the HMRC about something called the side hustle tax. What does that mean for sellers out there?
Well, it's existed for a while, and it's to do with UK sellers making money off of selling their old things or trying to make up a side hustle, basically as the word says. So if you're making over 1,000 in a year, you do have to register as self-employed and then do a self-assessment with HMRC and pay your taxes. But obviously, as anything, there's buts and ifs, and not every situation applies. So Depop, for example, has brought out some statistics, and actually most sellers make £437 a year. So they wouldn't classify it for the self-assessment. You have to make over 1,000. But also this has to be specific items that you're selling. So I have a couple of examples here from some of our own sellers. I won't use real names just for the sake of GDPR, but let's say Bob, for example, is buying items off of a car boot sale and is selling them for more than he bought them. That would classify as a profit, and therefore he needs to be taxable. But then we have Sally on the other side, who has some items in her attic and she actually wants to get rid of them. And she sells them on Vinted or eBay, on any of these marketplaces. But she's ranking less than what she bought them for, so she wouldn't count.
So basically what you're saying is with the new side hustle tax, it's always on the profits making, not on any income. So I've seen, and when I've read the articles behind this, there's a lot of concerned people that, are trying to, as you say, declutter sometimes, right?
Yeah.
Because that is an effective way of being able to declutter your home and whatever you have. But yeah, I think that's what's really important for sellers that are working on this marketplace, such as Depop, Vinted, that yesterday I've started talking to these companies. However, it's very important that you understand it's always on the profit that you're making. So if you're especially trying to run a business, do that. It does apply to you.
Yeah, exactly. So don't be worried when springtime comes and you do your spring clean. It's all to do with the profit. But speak to an accountant and they'll be able to tell them exactly your situation, and they'll be able to say if you need to do a self-assessment or either.
Oh yeah, this leads to the next section, which is all about high returns, right? So right now, after the Christmas period especially, it's the return season really, especially with products that are not necessarily what you wanted, or it's not whoever you gifted to whatever they wanted, or it's a different size than you expected as well. And according to a company called Zigzag, we're looking at a 16% increase in returns in the UK between the day of the 24th of December to the January the 2nd. In the US, we're looking at 26% higher. And then the 1st and 2nd in January alone, we're looking at a 42% increase in the UK. Why do you think, apart from the return side of things, why do you think is a possible reason, Natalia, that these rates are going higher and higher?
I mean, you touched up on, okay, it doesn't fit me the way that I wanted to, I'm going to choose a different size, which is obviously just nothing you can control. But I do tend to see a lot of people that buy a product and now it's on offer, so you can return it and then obviously buy it for cheaper, which is a difficult situation for a lot of sellers. You need to be quite careful there what discounts you offer now in January when those people were buying it in December. Even in Black Friday, some of the Black Friday products that you would have bought are now cheaper. So really be careful there, because with the extended return period as well that you get for Black Friday and Christmas, they can still return. And that's the worst nightmare for any seller.
I also think the consumer standards have risen a lot in this period, right? And I always call it the Amazon effect, the Prime effect. You know, as a consumer myself, I always, even speaking to sellers, I always say, hey, as a Prime eligible consumer, I always go, and Amazon is my first go-to when I want something urgently, because it gets delivered to my house the next day.
Easy.
Even the same day sometimes, right, in the UK. So I think that's a massive part of how our standards as consumers have keep going up. And there's a particular stat that I'm looking at where 48% of the returns that ever happen are paid returns in e-commerce, which means that businesses and sellers are increasing their customer sort of retention and customer loyalty as well by making sure that the returns process is very easy.
Yeah.
Any personal experience on that side of things?
Yeah, it's a difficult subject because you want to potentially charge for the return to mitigate some of these returns, but you don't want to put off people buying potentially two items, the same item, different sizes, which I do sometimes. You buy a pair of trousers and you just buy two sizes because you haven't bought from them before, maybe you don't know your size, so you just want to make sure that you want to keep one of them. So by buying two of them, if you now make the return payable, it could put your sellers off of buying from you, so your customers buying from you. So it's a difficult topic. Find the balance, and obviously take care of your discounts, make sure that they're equal throughout, and just consider what type of seller buyer do you have. Are they going to be buying multiple and then potentially returning one of them? What's your category as well? Because obviously I use trousers as an example. Fashion is the one that they return the most. But on Amazon, do you buy fashion, or do you tend to buy maybe technology and things like that that you might not return as much?
Absolutely. I think there's a massive difference. What you said about fashion is, I think it's when I speak to sellers that are in the fashion industry, it's something that I always ask about their returns rate. And they're by far the industry that know their return rate as much as possible as well. And it tends to range around between the 15 to 24%, right? And that's normal because sizes are different and brands that use different sizing and different measures, different materials, and that's something that really happens. And one of the main points that I always make when talking about returns is having a localized warehousing solution. Simply because obviously UK past Brexit is now away from the EU as well on our customs basis. So wherever continent you are dealing with, whether it's the UK, the US, the EU, even in African solution, Asia and Australia, especially for businesses that have returns, you have to have a returns management solution, simply because it becomes a little bit of a nightmare, especially on the customer side of things. Returns don't come, you cannot give the customer satisfaction level that you really want, and it's something that I'll always push for these type of sellers, and we always have options as well to kind of speak about.
Yeah, especially with globalization now and different sizes. Obviously Europe sizes, Asian sizes, UK sizes, they're all different. Even shoes. I mean, Europe tends to have smaller sizes, so even I buy shoes from Europe and ship them over to the UK. It's just the size that fits me. So make sure that the returns policy also takes into consideration different countries, not just your local country, and just take care of the customer.
Amazing, yeah. And on the final section that I wanted to speak about in the news section is with a serious movement that Amazon is doing from road to rail, right? And working for Qatar Global Logistics, especially, what we are seeing is, especially with the Red Sea disruptions that we're going to touch up in the next section, is there is a serious movement of sellers asking, what are my solutions outside of ocean freight. Okay, and even Amazon are adopting it, because road freight, as much as there is plenty of availability of companies willing to do the road freight, rail freight and ocean freight is a lot more effective, not just for cost, but for times, for feasibility, for things going wrong as well, because it's something that happens a lot. Our customs team at Avast deals with it on a constant basis. Things can go wrong, especially by road. It's one tire away popping, right, for something going wrong. So from what I've read is Amazon have looked into 50% to go towards rail. And the main reason is the rail system in Europe is actually very well connected. Believe it or not, a lot of my sellers are surprised when I say, hey, actually, you know, there's a rail option all the way from China all the way to the EU, and it's all very well connected. Obviously, it's not as straightforward as it is. Rail also has some of these issues, and also connecting trains can take a little bit of time. However, it is a very sustainable option in terms of, out of all three options, well, out of the option between air, rail, freight and ocean, it's definitely the most sustainable one.
Yeah, I think we've seen customers shift towards rail more than trucks in the last couple of years.
Absolutely.
And now Amazon is taking this initiative. It's even going to boom even more. And let's not forget the environment. So that's one of the main reasons why Amazon is doing it. We're taking care of the environment. They want to make sure that their aim is actually to be net zero carbon emissions by 2040. So hopefully with this change, it goes in the right direction.
Most importantly for me is understanding the speed of it, right? Because with the demand of consumer needing more products, getting stock available in all your centers, in all Amazon FBA centers, but also your warehouses, you have to be really strategic in the way you think about replenishing your stock as a seller, right? Because there is 4 different ways to freight products. Air tends to be, yes, the most expensive, but the quickest one, right?
Yep.
It's one airplane away, and that's really important. However, as we already said, for sustainability is probably the worst one.
Yep.
But there has to be a counterbalance out of all of that, and that's something that we speak about Casa Global Logistics. It's about the strategy that you have to be able to replenish that stock, and also think about your higher selling SKUs. But as we said, and with the EU having such a strong movement towards sustainability, this is something that eventually will start affecting your business. Look at EPR regulations, look at the plastics tax regulations in the UK, for example. And we're seeing a serious movement in the EU towards having EPR, right?
Yeah, everyone's slowly shifting the way they make the products, the packaging that they put onto the products. So all these shifts eventually are just going to change the way that people sell. So knowing about this beforehand is really important. So you can start taking the measures that you need, start making the changes, and just get there before the other sellers. And especially with the things going on in the world right now, it's good to have options.